But that
Yeah.
we're gonna go into They Who Endure because we're gonna transition into the Nerf candidates, and
Top 10 Nerf candidates.
That's indeed, and we're gonna start with They Who Endure, a 6-mana 1/1. When I'm summoned, grant me +1/+1 for each ally that has died with Overwhelm. Fuck this card. I don't even know how else to say this. I fucking hate this card. I hate looking
Get
at it.
Endure out of my video game.
Yes, just get this. If this was like a tournament, I would have flipped the table. I would have ripped up the little kid's card, threw it in his face, and got banned from the store. But yeah, this card just creates a very unfair two-pronged effect, which we see a lot. Is like, so you develop this card after playing a very aggressive strategy where your opponent tried and punish you by killing your guys, but then you play a They Who Endure who recoups that value with a gigantic body, and then when you try and kill the They Who Endure, then that's when they throw it at your face. You try to block this card, that's the Overwhelm. It has an absurd stat line. So yeah, what could they do to change They Who Endure? Put a limit on it?
The Overwhelm could just go away, right? Like, I like the idea. I thought someone in chat say that. I like the idea overall of having a token deck boss, right? Like, I like that idea. If you're going to make a token deck, I like having a boss creature. It just shouldn't have Overwhelm. And the problem also is that the token deck also happens to be in the same color as Atrocity. So it's like, oh, well, you also just gave us this big giant win con. At least it would play around the way of like, this card can come down, smack you in the face for lethal, and then if you have an answer, you can also Atrocity it. If at least if they started with taking away the Overwhelm, maybe.
Yeah,
It just fits way too well into one strategy. And then it's just it devalues these high statted Overwhelm cards by just, oh, like, why would you ever play them? You could just make a They Who Endure who's 10 times bigger than that. This card is way bigger than Tryndamere most of the time, and it just works very well in that strategy, which just negates and nullifies the effectiveness of those other cards.
The card's a champion, and it's just worse. Period.
Right.
Yeah, I always wanted the Overwhelm to go away.
Yeah, there's like a combination of problems of this card. One, it costs 6 mana to make the behemoth that it is. 2, it works with every single ally that has died. There's no restriction on like each turn that an ally has died, what type of ally, like follower, not like there's every ally that least of my worries. The fact that there's no cap on it for its health, because as the card scales, it actually just becomes impossible to kill. You only kill it with cards like Vengeance, freezing it. Like, things that just hard remove it, like Will of Ionia, there's no getting around that. The Overwhelm, so now that you have this low-costed, impossible-to-kill body, it kills you in one swing. Like, it just attacks, and it says, I don't even care if you blocked with an 8 health unit, you're probably still dying this turn. And it's just like, why does it do all of these things? Why does it have this mana cost on top of a never-ending scaling of stats, on top of the Overwhelm, on top of the fact that, like, there are multiple copies allowed in the deck, which is just a festive Runeterra. There's nothing to be said about that. But like the fact that you can keep playing these guys, it's not like it's not like a 10 cost where it's like you only have time to play one. It's like, no, I just curve them. If I drew more than one They Who Endure and I play the first one and you kill it, everybody knows that feeling of like you managed to actually answer the first They Who Endure and you're just like, holy shit. I am killed that, and then they just play another one and you're just like,
what if it costed more? What if it was coming down later in the game and it still had the Overwhelm? Like, you were able to set up those big token, numbers, but it did have to come down later. You weren't able to, like, for 12 mana, you weren't able to play this plus Atrocity. Maybe if we just make it a lot more expensive, if it wants to keep the Overwhelm. If it doesn't want to keep the Overwhelm, I think that we have to reduce this card's stat line. Maybe make it +1/+1 for each other ally that has died. Start gutting its stats and keep it the way it is.
Like it starts at like 4 or 5 health and it just gets attack as things die. That's one way to go about it, so the card can actually die. Another one is, like you said, just remove the Overwhelm and you're allowed to have a 17/17 if it doesn't have Overwhelm. It's still very powerful.
You have to invest another card to actually get that Overwhelm.
Right. And then you can combo with it, or even like cards like Atrocity. And another one is the fact that like this card could cost like 8 mana. If you look at like the power level of this card and try to relate it to other cards in Runeterra, like a close comparison is around the 8 mana line of like cards like Tryndamere. We have cards as powerful as like Riptide Rex, and like getting towards the finisher tier of like, Ladros and things like that. So like playing this card on, like, it's just being able to play it on 6 and then play a different copy on 8 as like a different card doesn't really make sense. It just being able to play it like so early like that. It's not even like it's like, oh, if you play it early, there's like a big sacrifice to be made. It's just like, nah, it's still like an 8/8 with Overwhelm. I talked about in like the Endure guide and from playing, and a lot of people see of like sometimes you call it like it's like the tempo Endure where it's kind of weak and you put it out, but it being weak is like an 8/8. That's not a weak card.
It's not a weak card.
Overwhelm is still better than the vanilla that is in a higher cost. Alpha Wildclaw is a 6 mana 7/6 with Overwhelm. This card is always bigger than that. This card is at worst a 7/7 by that point in the game with the deck that's played in. And then Atrocity is another big problem with this card. But like, I think this card might be problematic without cards like Atrocity. That just makes it the like unstoppable force that it is right now.
Yeah, fuck the Endor. I'm gonna talk about.
There's lots of ways that they can nerf this card, and I hope that it sees one.
Yeah, I see a lot of people saying that the cards that kill off your own guys are too powerful, but that's an archetype that exists in every card game. It's something that should exist in this game. Blighted Caretaker specifically should probably receive a nerf, or Cursed Keeper on the screen should probably receive a nerf. This card is definitely a little too strong, but
yeah,
that archetype will always exist. There will always be a good way to just kill off a bunch of your own guys and abuse that card if it remains the way it is.
So Curse Keeper, if you guys didn't play originally, this card was very popular. The classic Curse Keeper Ravenous Butcher strategy has been in the game since beta. It just fell out of favor when Mist Wraiths were played because there were just much better things you could have been doing. And a 4/4 on turn 2, while that was powerful, your Mist Wraiths were just going to get bigger very quickly, and it nullified this very high roll strategy. But now we have more activators for Curse Keeper, and then B, there's less things that deal with a combo like that. And yeah, I think it really just starts with the Escaped Abomination. This card is a 4/4 for 2 mana. There's too few ways to deal 4 damage. There aren't any, I don't think, actually, right? Or does that actually do 4 damage to a unit?
No, I mean nothing that early.
Trifarian Glory Seeker is like the only early game way to deal with cards like that. That's a 1-card combination.
Yes, it's a 1-card combination. There are
2-card combinations that can deal with this card, sure.
Right, like a gotcha off the top and a 1-mana thermo if you didn't do anything on turn 2. Like
just any of the like Mystic Shot plus any, like 1-drop, any of the 2/1s or something. But they're all 2-card combinations. And that's the problem we saw with a card like the Boom Crew Rookie. 1/4 on turn 2 is just 4 HP on turn 2. There just aren't answers. The card always gets to go to combat twice, no matter what.
Right.
Or it gets hit by a spell and then it still gets to go to combat. It never dies on turn 2. It does not happen. And like Trifarian Glory Seeker is still like the only way in the game that like you were to deal with a card like that pretty much that early in any like consistent fashion. With Boom Crew Rookie, there was like Calling Strike and some like corner cases where it was like a little bit, but like this is a 4/4. This is a 4/4 on turn 2. And even if it doesn't come out on 2, you might have just had the attack token on 3, and because you waited until turn 3 to play a card as busted as Blighted Caretaker, which is good even when you're hitting bad cards a lot of the time, and then you hit something like this, it's like you just get the 4/4 on your next attack token, and it's still just ridiculous. It's
right. The setup is just insane because nothing deals with it up until like forever almost. There aren't many cards that deal with a 4/4.
Yeah, I think a good way to nerf this is just make the Abomination a 3/3. That would be a start.
I think a 3/3 is harsh. I like a 4/3, but this card would still make if it summoned a 4/3, this card would just lose all of its value.
I still think this card would be very strong. That's a point that I feel like we disagree on a bit of like I think this card can be a 4/3 and still be pretty strong.
So
I think it's still
that way.
I think it's a 4/3. It's still pretty.
Any 2-drop just trades with
really
this.
Strong.
Then a 3/2 trades with the 1/1 body and then trades with the Abomination.
The thing is, though, is that all the cards that kill it right now actually give you a beneficial effect rather than it being like a sacrifice you're making. The only time it feels like you're really like making a shitty play to get the card out is like Vile Feasting your own Curse Keeper, right? But like Blighted Caretaker, positive effect. Butcher, sure, it's not like a crazy thing. It's still a 0-mana 3/2, so like there is a positive to be evaluated there of just playing a cheap, well-statted unit for 0. I mean, it's like as long as the card didn't have to sacrifice a real unit, it's always pretty solid in a deck like that. Even Glimpse is like you still draw 2 cards. So
is it too good? Maybe we take away the can't block clause if we made it a 3/3. That way, it's like still a 4/4 in value across 2 bodies, but you can deal with the cards individually.
To trigger it, it'd have to be like a 3/2 or something like that.
Right,
like,
but you can ignore it, right? Like just like we do now, you just essentially ignore it. But I guess it does it. But it would make your blocks worse.
So like no matter what comes out of it, it's like it turns into like an aristocrat type card of like
the
cards
just
that would make this card way too good.
Yeah,
you have to make the stat line pretty shit on the back, and it'd probably still be like playable. But I know I'm pretty in favor of the 4/3. 3/3 is definitely too weak. 3/4 still feels like it's going to do similar aggravating things of just being like a Badger Bear that pops out of this, but definitely a 4/4 is not okay. That just is certainly just not really.
Yeah, they nerfed Badger Bear because that early in the game you just shouldn't have stat lines like that. So I think we all agree you can't have 4/4s popping out that early in the game. It just really steamrolls.
But yeah, we can also talk about Curse Keeper's best friend, Blighted Caretaker. Also, just an incredibly aggravating card.
Arguably the more busted card, even. The card that really brought this card out of the woodwork again.
This card's absurd.
Right, so against any slower deck, you grab their only blockers, and then against any fast deck, you just get so much value by trading into their guys.
Right, you kill 2 things, essentially. You kill 2 things and peel them for a big swing as well. You're getting damage and killing 2 guys.
Is the simple fix just make it only summon 1 of the saplings or change the sapling stats? The problem with changing
the sapling to 1/1s would be a huge step in the right direction.
There's a huge balancing ripple effect with that because lots of cards use saplings.
Right.
And then you're making those cards worse also.
Right, yeah. So that
Maokai becomes worse.
Right.
This card could also not cost 3
sapling
mana.
Toss or
this card could cost 4 mana and still be a fucking good card. It's so strong.
Yeah, I really am not a fan of this card. I guess I was a fan initially because when the set was previewed, I know that we all were really high on this card. But it's just too good. It is so good.
I think maybe one sapling would be a way to nerf it. Maybe that just makes it unplayable, but it still is a challenger. It still does kill things in the early game. It still is an activator for your, token based things, but maybe that's just not giving you the tempo that you need for this card to be effective enough to see play anymore.
Definitely can't make him a spell because this is a different card, so they'll never make. It's not like within the realm of possibility for something like this. I think it's it's a problem though because I think the best way to nerf it is just make those saplings have 1 attack. But you're right, that does have a ripple effect of how does that work with the other sapling cards? Do they just change it to say something that's not saplings? But that doesn't that it's just too much. I think making this card cost 4 mana is actually a pretty reasonable change. If they wanted to make the card be a 3/1 or something, maybe then.
Right, at least that way you're not curving into it. You're not just going into the Curse Keeper on 2 into this on 3 every time, and that's just a god.
Fit into stuff either of those ridiculous late game pushes of it only costs 3 mana out of your big turn to just add this in to just challenge 2 guys regardless of what their stats are. The fact that you just get 2 challengers and a body, that's 3 attackers for 1 card, in 75% of the time you're sacrificing a card that is going to summon something else in its place. So if you're just putting 2 challengers on your board, just the aggression power that you have of that, it's so much. It just puts so much damage on the board and enables you to then attack. The whole point of putting well-stated cards on the board for defense is that it actually deters your opponent from attacking. If I have a Badger Bear on the board, my opponent actually doesn't attack with several cards rather than just the 1 card that's going to trade into it, because it makes their whole turn have an ineffective outcome. But when you just summon these free challenger guys, it's now everything gets to attack. Even the cards that shouldn't be attacking. Not only do they not get value traded on, a wider board can just swing in with everything. It adds so much damage beyond the saplings themselves.
Right.
And now I'm going to bring up a card that I don't think we necessarily agree with, but it is popular sentiment that Sejuani is either the best champion in the game or just the best card in the game. I don't see it really. I think this is just a good versatile card, and Frey desperately needs it because Frey is bad. But yeah, make the case for Sejuani getting a nerf.
The main thing that I would think would get changed on this card that we've mentioned is that extra copies of Sejuani in your hand do become Theory of the North. Maybe we can just make her champion spell not also one of the best games in spells in the game. I feel like most other champion spells are like they're pretty good. Some of them are can be fairly strong and good in unique situations. But this card's champion spell is literally just one of the best spells, period. And she's also just one of the most versatile and well-stated champs in her cost.
I'm pretty sure she
So,
does have the best champion spell, right? I can't think.
yeah,
of
I would
another
imagine.
one.
I can't think of anyone who has a better.
Most of them
like,
have pretty mediocre ones for the most part.
like Progress Day is pretty decent.
It's yeah, but still, it's like hard to
Um,
play an 8-mana spell.
Right. Gangplank, we've already said, is awful. Just seeing him
Terrible.
down there. Like, Fizz's spell is whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, like
The
TF
trickster.
pick a card it's only okay sometimes.
Yeah, it's
I mean,
okay as a top
literally
deck
like
card.
hers is just so good.
So
right?
good,
Like it's
right.
the actual best combat trick right now. It's seeing
It's like
play
if,
in multiple lists across the board.
Right, it's like if single combat was Garen's or something like that. It's just something like, oh yeah, everybody plays that spell. Well, now you get access to more of them.
I guess Lucian might be the only comparable
MF.
one. Like he does give you. Oh yeah,
MF
MF
gets the
make it rain is
rains.
good in certain scenarios. Lucian, though, the rallies are like usually always
Yeah,
good.
we haven't seen, and we've talked about it before as a balancing act to change the champion spell. Unfortunately, there probably just is way too much forethought when creating champions that their champion spell is like attached at the hip.
Right. It's something that will probably never be a way to balance change cards, but really does just add to the durability of the card. Like people who say like, oh, this card should have one less health is just like, well, that is like one of the only nerfs that I could ever see being made to this card. She feels like she gets so much worse with one less health. Like way more so than Vi, because this card costs 6 mana. But I don't know. Like her leveled up effect is extremely powerful too. Maybe there could be something to be said about that, but like
I think it's the front side that matters the most.
right. It's just a very well-rounded card. There's no like flaws in it. It's just a great
Right,
card.
and
Period.
it's
Like,
similar in the
everything
way
about
that
it is good.
Vi was just like too good and too versatile for what it did. I could see the argument for a card like Sejuani in the similar vein, but it's just Frey is so bad without this card.
Yeah, it really is one of
Every
like the
Frey
number one
deck uses this
like
card.
failure than anything. Yeah, it's so good overall. But like, how do you nerf it without making this card just so much worse? I don't know. It might be the
Right.
health. Like that's about it that I can think of. Do you make this card a 4/6 instead of a 5/6, or a 5/5 instead of a 5/6? That's like the only
You want it to
direction
be-
you can really go with this card that doesn't make it trash. If you wanted to make it worse, right? It's
like
just give it
pre-nerf
-1 in
Hackworm
one of
stats.
the two stats.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
6
think
health is
that's
just
where I'm at.
huge.
Maybe 1 health, and maybe look at that champion spell not being such a usable, versatile option. But I don't even
It
think
does make it
that's
so hard to
necessarily
kill her,
horrible.
like on top of the health of just like once Sejuani hits the board, there's like 4 to 5 Fury of the Norths in their deck as opposed to
Yes.
just 2 to 3. It's like, okay, well,
Which equals not only save this card from dying, but also just more face damage with its overwhelm.
right, attack, and you had some way to trade with it in combat, or add up the rest of the damage, and it's just like, nope, and I deal more. Oh,
Right.
okay.
And
Very
I got
nice.
5 of these coming at you.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, and we're gonna get to a lot of Bilgewater cards as we round out our top 10 nerf candidates, and we're gonna start with Warning Shot, one of the
Oh boy.
foundation cards to the strategies in Bilgewater. Simply 0 mana, burst
1
speed, do a damage. This card is silently just like outrageously broken. And number one, it just throws out the idea that damage always goes on a stack, which they tried to sell. They tried to peddle that nonsense in set 1 as like, oh, if it does damage, you always know that goes on a stack. But clearly that's not true. And then just the idea of not only unaccountable but also uninteractable damage. It's just not fun. It makes for what we call negative player experience, NPE, and that's just Bilgewater in a nutshell. It's just not NPEs. There's a ton of
Yes.
not fun parts about Bilgewater, and it does start with Warning Shot. I think a reasonable way to change this card would either be 1 mana so you can account for it, or fast. That means you can respond to it at least. But right now it has both aspects going
Let's
for
go
it.
priority pass. That's one of the biggest things that's overlooked that people don't understand about the burst speed. It's like there's no passive priority. I'm not allowed to play a card before you play your thing that you're going to plunder with. And that sometimes makes a big difference in the outcome of how things work, right? It's especially with Riptide Rex. If I wanted to put another unit on the board to try to divvy up the damage a lot, and that's one of the most aggravating things, but like it's not even about like how much of an activator is or how powerful the card is. Like it breaks the mechanics of the game. 0 mana, first of all, burst speed, damage to fate. Like there's just things logistically very wrong with this card being in the game.
Right. It's in I see chat calling out the word. It's not even broken. Well, you're right. We're not saying it's the card itself. Warning Shot in a vacuum is broken. But the activators, as Nick said, being able to play things with plunder activators that they have clearly shown they're willing to make undercosted because they value that plunder so highly, which they should in the normal way of playing the game. You have to attack in order to get that trigger. You have to attack everything. If something has to go through, your opponent has no way to shadow block it or remove your attack. You hit them in the face, and then on your main phase 2, you get to play one of these really cool plunder cards. In theory, yes, that would make a lot of these plunder cards balanced. However, Warning Shot allows you to just trigger the plunder beforehand, before any of that has happened, and then on top of that, no priority passes. You get to play one of these effects, and most of them are insanely powerful put in play effects, one of which ends the game pretty much. So I mean, that is where Warning Shot really, we need to take a look at it and be like, is plundering for no mana at burst speed when you can't interact with it, that is where the card really becomes not fun for players, and it just creates scenarios that you just can't play around because this is an actual card that they can just be holding at any given time.
Yeah, that's what I really don't like about it is, like I said, you cannot account for it. So it's not like, oh, my opponent has 9 mana or just like 7 mana. Oh, he can't, or just 8 mana. Oh, he has 8 mana. He can't play Riptide Rex. He needs an activator. Nope, this card's free. And then on the other side, you can't even deny this card. You can't stop that. It creates for very unfun situations where you cannot respond to a situation. And the intention with this card is very clear, that they were afraid that plundering was going to be too hard to activate. They wanted to make a cheap activator for that, and they also wanted to build it into the allegiance of itself. So that's why you see that Rifter has this card built into it, but simply they underestimated how easy it was going to be.
Nothing, chat, that I'd like to just get out of the way. When we say that 4 cards in a package deserve nerfs, we don't mean all at the same time. It's just that these are potential ways to deal with the problem of a entire package or archetype being too powerful, is you can limit the potential of one or some of the pieces, and then people will be like, well, if you want to nerf every Shadow Isle card, it's not a deck. It's like, no, that's not the point. And I don't want there to be any confusion about that. It's like, these are just things that have created problematic interactions that could be one of the multiple things that they nerf, or just one of the things that they do. It also depends on how they change the other cards. And also cards like Warning Shot specifically, it's this card just breaks the game logistically. Like, it just doesn't make sense with the way that they've tried to consistently make the rules of the game. It's just, it just
Right.
doesn't. So there's more to it than just like, this card's broken, needs a nerf. Like, of just like, it's too powerful or something. It's like, there's more to it than that when you talk about nerfing a card or buffing a card.
Yeah, it's exactly what Nick said, as far as that we're looking at these cards as a package. You know, is it the enabler that makes the package itself too good? Is it the payoffs that make the package too good? Where in the overall package, this cluster of cards, is it that we need to tweak to make the overall package still playable and good, but not overpowered? It's not any one individual card, and we're not calling out any one individual card. Though we may call some individual ones out just because they might just be oppressively overpowered.
Right. more than one card in the plunder archetype needs to be hit. More than one, 100%. They need to be changed, but you can minorly adjust 2 cards to the same effect as overly adjusting 1 card.
So that's
is how it can work out.
Pilfered Goods. All right. Speaking of the friends of Bilgewater, Pilfered Goods. Fuck this card, right, chat? Am I right? But yeah, just even if you look this card as a burst speed draw 2 cards, even though clearly this card is better than burst speed draw 2 cards, this card is just it's better than every other card that exists in terms of drawing cards. And then it's also so disruptive to your opponent and puts them... I don't want to make this a referendum on the idea of taking cards from your opponent's deck. The 2 separate things. We could talk about that later, perhaps. But yeah, just this card's power level is insane, taking away the idea that those cards are A, disruptive, and B, unaccounted for. So you have to either play around all the cards in your opponent's deck and yours, or you just play right into whatever the perfect out is, and then you get fucked. So Pilfered Goods could easily be 3 mana, I think. You guys have
it's another one of those things like Vacunder where there's a combination of problems with this card that make it overpowered more so than one individual thing about it.
Right. Yeah. I think that the three mana is a place to start, though. I think that's the main takeaway for me. Even requiring a plunder specifically, 2 mana burst to draw 2 cards, and not only just being draw, but as you said, being disruption as well. I just feel like it's insanely undercosted, even with the plunder trigger. They at least need to make this card cost more, because every other like 2 mana draw 2, like Glimpse, for instance, is a fast speed spell that makes you sacrifice a guy. Like this, the payoff of this is just too insane for its cost and the value.
Yeah,
and you get to just play the card instantly because it's burst speed. You're doing that at burst. You get to it's so much disruption, because it's like not only do they now have to play around all these things, but you can just rip random answers off the top. The RNG becomes through the roof.
Like,
right.
Against Ionia specifically, it's so ridiculous the things that you can draw.
Yeah, how many times have they stolen our Deep Med, and how many times have they stolen our Shadow Assassin and the Monk? It's just like insane.
Yeah. Even playing as the Ledros deck, they just rip your Ledros, and then they have a win con. Like, yeah.
Don't get me started on yoink cards. Everybody that's ever played this understands what it feels like to either be the person doing it or against it, where like they go like merchant, take your merchant, pilfer, and just draw your whole package, and then just do it again. And it's like there's so many things wrong with just that scenario in general, or just the concept of these things existing in the current fashion, I would say for sure. But yeah, 2 mana draw 2 is pretty good no matter how you look at it. Like even if you do have to plunder is just too easy to trigger. There's no like, I think Riot clearly that's like another big problem is like they wanted to be like, okay, plunder is an excuse for us to make cards more powerful. It requires some other form of input, but like it's too easy because it can be attack or spell damage, and there's too many good activators. Like cards like Make It Rain and Warning Shot are just like, it's too simple of like, okay, first I have a chance to attack, then my opponent makes a crappy play to try to make sure that they don't take face damage and take suboptimal blocks. So I can extract value just by the presence of these cards. Then when that doesn't pan out, I just Warning Shot you and get my cards anyway. Or I just play Make It Rain and one of the shots hits face anyway. At like such a low cost. And the card advantage doesn't matter of like blowing cards, because all these cards net card advantage back. It's not about... These decks do not run out of cards. That's never a problem for them. It's just, it's how mana efficiently that they can play these things on top of that, of like how mana efficient the activators are and how mana efficient drawing all these cards is. They invest so low to gain so much.
Salvage is, for a point of comparison, Salvage is 4 mana and sees play in terms of actual value.
Right. Deep Mana is a good card when you pay 5 mana for it sometimes. Right. Paying 3 mana for it is broken, right? And I know people always say, oh, you're stealing your opponent's cards and not your own cards, so shouldn't they be worse? It's just like, well, in some cases, but in a lot of cases, just adding an element to your deck that wasn't supposed to be there in the first place creates for a lot of just broken gameplay scenarios of like, you just, if I'm playing against Ionia, I know that they have Will and Deny, and they made the sacrifice of locking into that region. They only have what's available of that. And then when you add additional regions, it's just like, okay, like you're breaking the limitations of the game too easily anyway. Like the cards that generate like random cards outside of other regions are like a little bit different. It's very controlled what they grab, and there's a large pool of things that aren't even constructed playable. But it's like, no, I'm stealing constructed playable cards. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad, but I also just got them for extremely low mana investment, and then also just reduce their mana on top of that. It doesn't really make for great
excessive.
gameplay.
Right.
It's completely excessive. Speaking of excessive, let's talk about Riptide Rex. 8 mana plunder, Cannon Barrage 7 times on random enemies. Obviously, we know that Cannon Barrage doesn't even work the way it's supposed to. If you don't have a board, they still just all hit you in the face for some godforsaken reason. But yeah,
Riptide Rex, a unit unless they don't have one.
This card has so much built-in protection, so this card always goes right. The Riptide Rex never fails. It hits all your board and destroys your board. You waste your whole turn developing, or I don't have a board. What are you talking about? Nope, all in your face. And then even if you had a deny, there's only one deny in the whole game. It's called deny. And even if you had that, now I'm gonna put it into 7 different spells, so you can't stop it.
Right.
This
This
card
just it like you said, excessive is exactly what I think of with this card. It excessively uses the stack. There's 7 like skills on the stack. You literally can only play 2 fast speed spells after this card resolves. I mean, it hits everything it needs to do. It burns the face. We've seen a few times on stream, it burns your face, as Matt said, even if you don't have anything on the board, which it shouldn't even work that way. The warning shot and this on 8 is just one of the most powerful turn 8 plays that just exists in the entire game right now, and there's just no counterplay to it. I think that this card definitely needs a big nerf. Maybe does it need the Ledros treatment? Does it just need to go up a mana? Or is it the Cannon Barrage? I mean, the Cannon Barrage, I feel like at the very least needs to work correctly.
But it's
Maybe
a combination.
Deal one.
Exactly what we talked about. The combination of problems with like having a card like Warning Shot exist. It's just like this card is just an 8 mana with this effect. It's not like, I need some setup or additional mana to activate. No, this is just an 8 mana card with this effect. That's like where one of the big problems of like, and there's no counterplay. It's exactly what they just said. It's like there is no reasonable way to counter this card other than just praying that it's the perfect outcome for you. And a lot of the time, there's a vast majority of the combinations and outcomes that come out of this card are all going to be bad for you, very bad for you. So it just,
I think going to 9 at least, it gets rid of that really strong turn 8 play, which can be the game ender in a lot of situations. It would really neuter Riptide Rex. Another consideration is it would just deal 1 damage to a unit. So if it's hitting the board, then it would just not do anywhere close as much disruption as it used to.
The other problem,
I think the 1 is good.
1 damage, but maybe do more than 7 shots, like 10 shots or something like that to still deal a little more damage. But then it's like the stack maxes out at 9, and another part of it is that this shouldn't be 7 separate effects, especially with like just like the way that interacts with the game, and for so many reasons, it's just like, why? It just doesn't.
I would much rather have it like, rather than be a skill that has to target a bunch of things individually beforehand and then start resolving. Maybe it would just be like something that deals 1 to something, and then if it kills something, then it starts dealing 1 to another random target until it kills it, or something like that. But just make it more, more balanced.
Maybe more predictable too. Of like if it had like some
more
kind of
RNG,
it attacks the highest. And then
start
if there's access
hitting the strongest,
the next one,
right? The strongest or weakest, however they want to balance it. But okay, Cannon Barrage, the strongest enemy until it dies, then resolve X amount of this until the end, and then
just start at the strongest and just keep going down the line, or start at the weakest and keep going down the line, or something like that. Some more playability. Right. I was also thinking that this card could cast Make It Rains instead of Cannon Barrages, and just reduce the number, not 7 Make It Rains, obviously, as opposed to Cannon Barrages, but like an actual card, maybe, I don't know, and less of them, so you don't have to rework the Cannon Barrage like skill itself. Maybe I don't really know, but like that, I just always thought that would have made sense when I saw this card and I saw it say Cannon Barrage 7 times. I thought it was talking about like Make It Rain, the card, like multiple times. That's just like how I read it originally, and I was just like, oh well, that's obviously like the most snap card ever. I'm like, oh, Cannon Barrage is like a specific card, not like just that. But yeah,
Someone in chat said make it so the skills are canceled if you kill it in response. I mean, that would be
That would
cool
just
if
make
they
this
could
card
design
bad.
it in a way, but it would probably just make it unplayable.
Right. It already has 4 health. If you just kill this card in response, this card would be bad.
Oh yeah, you couldn't. This card would not be playable.
Yeah.
In any fashion.
I'm
Probably.
gonna put in an honorable mention too before we move on to the announcement stuff. On Unyielding Spirits, I'm sure everybody in chat thinks that this card is too broken, that this card is terrible and it ruins the game, and you're right, it does ruin the game, but the card just isn't good enough really to be. It's annoying and it sucks and it shouldn't exist in the first place, but what we live in the real world. They clearly don't want to make this card unplayable. They like the way it works. Yeah, you just have to live with it until they make more negation cards, and maybe that's where we are with it. They Who Endure too. Maybe we just need more access to silence cards. But
Right.
until then, I think Unyielding Spirits, if you made this card 9 mana, they already acknowledged that that would make it terrible. If you made this card fast, it's even worse.
Right.
There's
If you
just
look at
no
this
way
card
to-
in every other card game, this card exists in every card game, and it's terrible. And the
Right.
only reason why people even complain about the card is just because it's like, oh, I have to play like a few specific cards to counter, and it's just like this is still an 8 mana play to make a play like that. And the more annoying reason of why this card used to be obnoxious is because like the deck that you could play it in was good, like it was broken already, and it could just jam this card at the top end at no cost, no build around, just to cheese decks that couldn't interact with it. And that's not really the case anymore. It doesn't work like that. So like, I think they did a good job of just like Demacia isn't as good. So this card just doesn't feel as annoying because like they can't just jam this card in a deck.